Tom Clark's 6M podcast is a Boink Studios production. And now, on with the show. Hey, what is up? Welcome to Tom Clark's 6M podcast. I'm your host, Tom Clark, and in this episode, I'm joined by co-host Phil Lindsey. There's very few bands, in my opinion, that are who they're going to be on the first album. Stay with me, kids. This will make sense in a second. Some bands evolve, and you don't really know what kind of band they're going to become. Aerosmith kind of jumps to mind. If you listen to Steven Tyler's voice as a young man compared to the 80s, it's two totally different singers. It doesn't even sound like the same guy. Their first few albums were good. They maybe weren't great, okay? I think, in my opinion, they were still trying to find themselves as a band, and they really hit their stride after they got off the stuff. When they got cleaned up, that's when they hit their stride in the 80s and things started popping for them. They started getting, famous, Run DMC and all that connection happening. There's other bands too. Guns N' Roses, in my opinion, was Guns N' Roses on the first album. I don't know if I could say, it took a couple albums. Kiss took a couple of albums because you listen to the first couple Kiss albums, they're not terrible, but it's not Kiss. It's just kind of a bluesy, in the groove rock song, but no stage show, no presence, no big power bass chords. All that stuff kind of came a little bit down the road. I say all that to say this. Today we're talking about one of the most well-known rock bands in the history of music, and that's Queen. And today we're talking specifically, if you read the subject line, you think Queen, they're going to talk all about the band, and we will. But this is not a bio of the entire band. It's not what we're setting out to do anyway. What we're going to do is talk specifically about the first album, which is entitled, Yes, Queen. In this humble podcaster's opinion, this album is just a taste of what Queen is going to become down the road. In my mind, this album is not a fully fleshed out represented form of what we come to know as Queen when they really hit the spotlight and really hit their stride and really become successful and known the world over. Interested to see what my co-host's opinion is because he and I have not discussed that take. So we're going to get into it here today. So Phil, you are a big Queen fan. And I know we were back and forth on what album to cover because I don't know in my mind if Queen is known as an album band or if they're known as the song band, the hit band. But to be fair, they've got some really good albums. Okay, so we're choosing the first one. I'm not going to ask you when's the last time you listened to this because I'm sure the Queen stuff is usually in your rotation quite a bit. But is this your favorite Queen album? And if so, or if not, why is that?
It's not my favorite Queen album. I think that they became known as the hit band for people that first got their introduction to them through stuff like Bohemian Rhapsody and We Will Rock You, all of the big records, all the stadium records. Um, but for their first run of albums, their first 3 albums, they were very much an album band, in my opinion. I feel like those first 3 albums are tremendous from start to finish. Like I feel like particularly their first 2 albums are, in my opinion, um, I feel like they are like quintessential classic rock albums. Um, and I feel like there was a moment there where if anybody was looking for, what was going to be the rival to Led Zeppelin, I feel like that was Queen for a brief moment. Those first 2 albums were amazing. Um, I think my favorite Queen album is probably Sheer Heart Attack. So I don't think it's this album, but it's tough to say that this album is not up there for me because, like I said, it's just so good from start to finish.
I don't know that I ever would have put it that way. That they were possibly, I don't want to say heir apparent, but maybe someone to maybe rival Zeppelin at some point. That's an interesting way to put it. Um, so I want to jump off that point here because as I started this show, and I'd like to get your take on this. To me, this is not Queen yet fully formed, but there are flashes of some brilliance here, man. Like from
Uh,
the first song to the last track, it feels to me like they're on the verge of finding their voice. What do you think about that?
I feel like this album is still very much them transitioning from Smile into Queen. Um, for those people that don't know, Smile was the original name of the band before Freddie joined, and he came up with the idea to change the name to Queen. That was after he became lead singer, and after they added John Deacon as the bass player. Um, and I mean, you can see all of the remnants of Smile here. You can see that a good amount of the album is songs written by Brian May, and they're great songs. But they're not indicative of Queen's discography going forward because moving on into the second album, uh, Freddie's fingerprints are such a big part of the album going forward. You could tell from the songs in this album that Freddie wrote moving forward into the next few albums. Like some of the biggest hits are Freddie records, or some of the biggest records that are love songs, or you know, uh, I don't know, definitive Queen records are also maybe John Deacon records. And I feel like creatively, um, they evolved so much more after this album. I feel like they meshed better as a band after this album. And that's not to say this album isn't good, but I feel like this was just kind of them getting their feet wet as a group.
Yeah, and take a minute, man, and think about what would have happened um, had they not found him for the lead singer. Like I can't imagine. I mean, I guess maybe we're not talking about this band, or if we are, we're talking about this band very different tones because finding Freddie Mercury was game changer for these guys. I mean, they absolutely came to their own. And Freddie brings, and I hate this word because it's Queen, and this word is used with Queen for a lot of different reasons. But he had a very operatic tone. He had a very, uh, and again, dumb word because it's used so much for these guys, but like, and for him especially, but he had a stage presence. He had a life to him. He was, dude, I submit Freddie Mercury was one of the best frontmen of all time. And that's a big comment, but man,
Oh,
he's got to be
I would
top
agree.
10, doesn't he?
I agree. I think that I think he's one of the best rock vocalists ever. Um, and not just that, I think he's one of the best performers we've ever seen. And I mean, you could say they may have had some success without Freddie, but he changed so much about the group. Their live performances are not the same without him up front. The songs are not the same without the vocals on it.
Mm.
There's a very specific example on this album of how much his vocals changed the group, and I'm sure we'll talk about it when we get to the song. But um, even like the look of the band, because for people that don't know, he went to art school. He went to art school, and he also was a little bit in fashion design. And just the look, the way they dressed, that they was so influenced by him. The name of the band, uh, his piano playing, uh, his songwriting, his influences are all over this group. They just wouldn't be the same group without him.
Yeah, and they're not, by the way, kids, the same group without him. And
No.
Phil, it's easy for fans to cast and throw stones at bands who continue without a lead singer. But dude, when that's your livelihood and you don't, maybe you never went to college, you don't know a trade, but you love to play music, what are they supposed to do? Just wither away and die as well? Like that's, I never faulted them for pushing forward. But dude, it's, to your point, it's never been the same band, man. And Paul Rogers, by the way, Phil, also one of the great rock vocalists of all time. I don't know if I consider him a front man, but dude, a very powerful voice. And when you hear Paul Rogers, you know who it is. It's Paul Rogers. I mean, it's, Bad Company, any number of Free, any number of other bands, The Firm. I mean, this guy's been around for years and years and years. He did a bang up job. He did what Paul Rogers can do, but he's not Freddie Mercury.
Yeah.
And
Um,
and neither is Adam Lambert. And dude, no disrespect to Adam, but come on, man, those are some big shoes to fill.
great vocalist, but he's
Yeah.
not Freddie. And I think it's so easy to just get stuck in something like, well, um, Freddie was a big part of the group because he was the talent. I know that a lot of guys that are frontmen, people are like, oh, well, it's not the same without him because he was the talent. It's not just that. There's so many things that he brought to this group creatively that, like I said, he changed the face of what they were doing. It's not just that um, he came in and they changed the name. I believe he designed the logo. As a matter of fact, he did. He designed the logo because the logo has everybody's zodiac sign in it.
Very true.
Like there's two lions in it because there's two Leos in the group. There's a crab because there's a Cancer, and then I think Freddie is a Virgo, so there's like a it's a fairy,
Mm.
and so yeah, he is just such a big part of everything they did. Like I said, from their costume design, um, from just how they presented themselves thematically, uh, like I said, their live performances, they are not the same group in any way without him. And I think that is one of my gripes with the movie Bohemian Rhapsody is that I think you get an idea of why he was important to the group, but you don't get the full scope of everything that he did for that group.
Yeah, and we've mentioned that movie here before, the 6M. Um, you know, the guys had a lot to do with this film, but it gave their perspective, which Phil, you would assume would be the right perspective. Like, who would imagine that the band's perspective is not the true look? But man, there's been things come out since then said from other people not in the band who are like, yeah, that's not at all how this happened. Like,
Yeah, I mean, well,
uh,
he's so different from the other three members. Yeah, I mean, he's Indian. Um, He is, of course, homosexual, and I don't think they understood his struggles with homosexuality. And I say struggles not to say that he wasn't comfortable with who he was, but being a homosexual lead singer for a rock band in the time that he was, that wasn't normal. That wasn't the norm, and so I don't think people understood everything that he was going through at that time. Was trying to be comfortable with who he was and trying to be uh, very apparent with who he is, but also being conflicted with the family he grew up in and their religion, and expectations for him as a rock singer. And so I don't think they could fully understand his experience. So they can't give you they can't give you the correct perspective of that because they're just not him. They're just reading it from what they knew about him from the outside looking in.
yeah, that's fair. I mean, dude, without knowing the answer, do we know how close were these guys? How much did he confide in them for real? Like, were they really like a close knit like brothers, or were they just co-workers? Were they close but not that close? Like, I don't know. I don't know what the good answers are to these questions, man.
I mean, they were friends. I think that it says everything that the guy that does not do anything with the group anymore since Freddie died is John Deacon. And I think John was in some ways his closest friend in the group. And I think once it was gone, it's not even I think, it's I know. Once he was gone, he was very vocal about there is no group without Freddie. I will not do it without him. And again, that's one of those things that is missing from the movie. You don't get an idea of their friendship. You don't get an idea of, you know, just how close knit those two were. I mean, when you look at the video for Liar, for example, and like along the bridge when they're doing the vocals and they're sharing a mic, that's nowhere in the movie.
Mm.
And I just like when you look at the video, you could see it in that moment, just like how they had bonded early on because they joined the group at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate they got it wrong. Um,
And I
I
mean,
mean, stylistically, the movie's not bad. The editing is horrible. The camera cuts. The
I
camera cuts are
mean,
like watching Monday Night Raw. It's that bad.
the editing is bad. You've got a very problematic director attached to it in Bryan Singer.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
uh, I mean, you've got all kinds of creative issues with it, but I don't think it's a bad movie. I do think that it has a lot of strengths. I think the live performances are amazing. The recreation of the live performances is really good. The music is uh, is showcased very well throughout the movie. I don't think you could have cast a better guy to play Freddie Mercury. He was perfect. He very much deserved all of the recognition and awards he got for it. He was not the problem with this movie. I just think that it's a very flawed view of who Freddie was, and I actually think it's a flawed view of who they were as a band as well. Because I don't think you get an idea of who John was as an individual either.
That's fair. Were you gutted by this film being such the Queen guy that you are? Did it rip your heart out when you went to see it? Like, what is this?
No, I went to see it in the movies, and I enjoyed it as a fan because again, I enjoy the live performances. I enjoy a lot of nostalgia, but there were some things that definitely took me out of it, like that doesn't go there, or that didn't happen at that time, or why'd they do that, or like I still think one of the weirdest things they do is try to tell us that Freddie went into the Live Aid performance knowing he had AIDS at the end of the movie. And it's like he kind of has to, it's like their way of trying to wrap the movie up in this nice bow that he had struggled with his sexuality all the way up to the Live Aid performance. And um, for his troubles for that, he ended up getting AIDS, and that's kind of how he ended his life. And that's just not true. And it kind of paints his sexuality as something he was ashamed of, and that's also not true. Um, Yeah, it's just some of the stuff that the way they try to wrap up the movie with this like weird, bittersweet happy ending is just not good. Uh, but like I said, some of my gripes with the movie are very much stuff because I'm in the know. If you're not in the know, if you're not like a diehard Queen fan, and you haven't watched tons of documentaries about them, and you don't know the ins and outs of certain things, it probably won't bother you as much.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Like isn't it that the Mike Myers scene never happened? That guy wasn't real? Is that right? That's not even a real person.
They leave out all of the stuff with their first manager. That's the other thing. One of the greatest things about those first two albums, well, no, the second and third album, is there is Freddie writing diss tracks to the manager.
Right.
Like there is no scene with Death on Two Legs in it. That is missed. Like, are you kidding me? This is one of the best rock diss records in my opinion. Like, come on, starting a song with this is a song about a real motherfucker of a gentleman. It's one of the greatest lines ever. um, yeah, no, that stuff is missed. I don't think you get an idea of just the progression from their first album on. And again, I know you have to try and compact all of this stuff into a 2 hour movie. But I don't think that they handled some of the parts of the origins of the band that well. I think they handled the stuff like how they got together well. I think they handled the stuff like his relationship with his on and off girlfriend well. But even that takes up so much time in the movie. Um, yeah, it's just very odd creative choices they made with the movie. But again, I feel like I'm that guy that uh, read tons of Batman comics and went to a Batman movie. It's just like, well, why did they put that in there? Why isn't he a detective for this movie? Why isn't he this? And it's just like there are things that I'm nitpicking as a Queen fan.
Yeah. That's fair. That's fair. Like, dude, I've always wanted to see a big budget Beatles film, and I don't know if it will ever happen. Surprised it never has. But if it
Yeah.
has, I'll love it and also be like, nah, that's nonsense.
Yeah, see the problem with a band like the Beatles or Queen is there's so many biopics out there. There's so much material out there about them that I don't think a movie could cover all of the ground that something like like the Disney Plus docu series that just came out. Like, there's no way they could get in that much depth about the Beatles. There's no way it'll cover all of that stuff well.
That's fair. Honestly, maybe that's the doc. We should all be happy with it because,
Yeah, I think
yeah,
that,
just all be happy
man,
with it.
and
Yeah,
I always
that's
think
fair.
that with bio, yeah, I think that I always think that with biopics, like documentaries are always usually better.
Oh man, yeah. Well, one day I still have hopes of something cool happening, but we'll see.
I think it'll happen someday. The Beatles are way too popular for them to not make anything based off of their lives. I think um, I wish more biopics would go the route of that Jimi Hendrix movie with Andre 3000 as the
Mm.
lead, where they just picked a period of his career and they covered all of that stuff instead of trying to cover his entire career. Because I think it tells a more cohesive story.
It's not a bad flick either. Did you catch Backbeat? Have you seen Backbeat?
I haven't.
Oh man. So Backbeat is the story of the Beatles in Hamburg, Germany, and Stephen Dorff plays Stuart Sutcliffe. So, and of course, they're not going to use "Love Me Do" or "Please Please Me" or "She Loves You" because that's before that time. And plus, who's got the money to spend on that, Phil? So they use the old standards. They use the old, rock and roll classics they were playing in the Cavern Club. This is actually predates Cavern Club. This is when in the bars in Germany when they were taking
Hmm.
pills to stay awake all night so they could play the show. And dude, it's not a bad flick. It's the closest we've ever got. If you can find it, it's very as a Beatles fan, I think you'd really dig it. There's a few inconsistencies there, like how Stewart, suffered the brain hemorrhage. There's the story that they show may or may not be true. I don't know, but like there's still sort of an urban myth about that. But it's not a
Yeah.
bad flick. So
Isn't there another Beatles film that's kind of like about the Quarrymen?
yes, and I think it's called Beautiful. Is it not Beautiful Boy? Is it? Oh, I can't remember that. Yeah, and I've not watched it yet, man, for some reason.
Yeah, I Nowhere Boy. Is that it?
Maybe that's it. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think it's Nowhere Boy because if I remember correctly, it has Aaron Taylor Johnson in it as John Lennon, and of course, if you know Aaron Taylor Johnson, Kick Ass and Quicksilver. Uh, I think it's Nowhere Boy. I think that's the name of it.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I haven't moved that far to watch it yet, but I do know it exists. Well, let's dive into this because I really want to talk about this album. It's one of those to me, it's one of those raw pieces of rock and roll history that doesn't maybe get talked about enough because as we said at the opening of this, they're known quite a bit for their hits and the big stadium songs that happened after the fact than they are maybe for the first few albums, which is a shame. Um, but we're going to get into this now, kids. So, what we're talking about, yes, the album is entitled Queen, released in 1972. Actually, is released in 70. Let's see, recorded between 71 and 72, released in 73. There we go. Uh, the total runtime is 38 minutes, 46 seconds, released on EMI Electra. And yeah, there are on the original release, and most time, kids, when we do an album review, we don't cover extended releases, anthologies, the 49 track version, quadruple album of tracks they found 40 years after the fact. No disrespect, but that's a lot of ground to cover.
So
Uh,
we're not going to talk about Mad to Swine. Is that what you're saying?
right, right. My God, we're gonna cover. Uh, we got 10 songs here, kids. Side one is 4 songs. Side two is 6 songs, and that's what we're gonna cover. So there you go, the original tracks. And we're jumping off here. The number one, I say, but the first song is called "Keep Yourself Alive," written by Brian May. This runs for 3 minutes 42 seconds. Feel the opening chords of this song sound in my head just like Headlong. It sounds like Headlong to me. What do you think about the first track, "Keep Yourself Alive"?
I think it is a perfect opening track for this album because it has this like driving rhythm guitar on it. It almost feels like you are flying high speed down a tunnel.
Hmm.
It just has this driving rhythm guitar until it starts the actual song, and it's great. I think that it is definitely a Brian May song when I listen to it and I think about other songs he's written. Um, but it's just such a great intro for not just his guitar playing. It has an excellent Roger Taylor guitar solo. I'm not guitar, but drum solo. Um, and Freddie's vocals on this are just as great as you expect them to be.
And dude, can we give John Deacon some credit because he is the unheralded,
Always.
unsung bass player in rock and roll history?
Yes, always. He is fantastic on this. I think the great thing about this album is I feel like there are moments in this where every member of the band shines for different reasons. You get a look at all of their individuality as musicians, as you know, as creatives. You know, whether that be songwriting or what they brought to the table, whether that be producing a solo or however, you just get such a good sample serving of all four of these guys. And I don't just lightly say they're one of the best bands ever just because they made great songs or I felt like they had good albums. I feel like there's no weak link in this group. Every single one of them are great at what they do.
Mm.
Um, and I just feel like this just opening will keep yourself alive, which is just such a catchy record. Has a great chorus, and like I said, just the instrumentation on this is just incredible.
Yeah, it is. In fact, it's the debut single by Queen, and as we said, written by Brian May. It is the opening track. Um, it was released as Queen's first single, along with "Son and Daughter" as the B side. It was largely ignored upon its release and failed to chart on either side of the Atlantic, which is effing nuts to me. It was also
um,
re-released as the non-B side of "Lily of the Valley" in 1974.
but I mean, even think about that. Just tells you where the band was when they first hit. Both singles were written by Brian May.
Mm,
I'm not
yeah.
sure how often that happened again throughout their entire discography.
And as you said, everybody in this band's great musician. Dude, Brian May's such a good guitarist. It's like I mentioned GNR earlier.
Amazing.
I know Slash's guitar when I hear it. I know Brian May's guitar when I hear it. You
Yes.
can't help but know.
Yes. And I mean, they're such a fascinating group because it's like just like I said with Freddie that he's not just a great vocalist, he's also a fantastic performer, classically trained pianist, uh yeah, art school student, fashion design, all these other things. And then we think of Brian May, he's this really good guitar player that was also like a rocket scientist. What?
Yeah,
He created like the sound from his guitar by building this guitar himself.
it's messed up.
Yeah, it's just that like all of these very intricate things about this band that people might not know. But again, I think they pushed this idea in the movie that these are four misfits that came together and made this amazing band, but you don't really get an idea of why they're misfits.
That's fair, actually. That's fair, man.
Because I mean, you can understand why Freddie is the weird one. He's the idiosyncratic one. But like I said, when you get all of these ideas that like, how did you end up here, Brian May? How did you end up in this band that you're like a very smart guy, but also an amazing guitarist?
Yeah, so the story behind this, kids, is that he wrote the song after the band had been formed, but before John Deacon joined. As confirmed by former bass player Barry Mitchell. There's a bit of trivia I bet no one in this audience knew. Uh, according to what May said in a radio special about their 77 album, News of the World, he had penned the lyrics thinking of them as ironic and tongue in cheek, but their sense was completely changed when Freddie Mercury sang them. Roger Taylor and May sing the vocal bridge of the song. Well, there you go, Phil, because you put any song in the hands of Freddie Mercury, he's going to make it his own, as he did here. I wonder what the song would have sounded like without him on it.
Yeah. Um, yeah, but I there are so many songs on this album that I could have guessed that these were written before they got together. It almost feels like this album is a amazing demo album for what Queen would be.
Hmm. Yeah. It's like an audition. It's an
I,
audition.
yeah, and I don't even like calling it a demo because that makes it seem like it's amateurish. It's very much not amateurish, but like I said, it's just such a on get catching them on the ground floor of what they would become as a band.
100% agree. I don't think demo is a bad word. I get what you're saying. The production quality is not bad,
Yeah, I mean
but it's
they
not
were
not top shelf either. Maybe you know.
yeah I think they were doing things that were pretty innovative with recording at that time as well. But that just goes into uh the four guys you had in this band and just how different they were from any other band. And yeah, again, I just don't want to make it seem like, all right, well, Freddie was the star, and so the rest of these guys were just guys that kind of held his bags. No, these guys were all great in their own right.
Yeah, and I'll tell you this is where because I love the first track, but I'm listening to the second track as we speak, and I'm really wanting to jump into it because you know I've covered albums here on the show before where the mix of music is just spot on. Like one's a really hard rocker, the next one's slow, the third one's mid tempo, the fourth is blasting your eardrums, number five is slower, number six is slower. You know what I mean? Like a nice balance. We start off with a toe tapper, snap your fingers, and then we got second one here, doing all right. It's track number two. This and I don't mean this as any other comment other than just the way I feel about it. This does not feel like a Queen song to me at all. This feels like a mid tempo, or it's like not mid tempo, but like slow tempo, 1970s in the pocket, in the groove, rock and roll song. It doesn't do too much, it doesn't do too little. I'm not going to call it lazy because I don't think it's lazy. I like the song, but I don't know that they broke any ground with this. The song runs for 4 minutes and 11 seconds, so it's not a short tune. What are your thoughts on Doing All Right? What do you think about it?
For the longest time, "Doing All Right" was my least favorite song on the album, um, because it just didn't feel like it fit, and I think it's because of what you're saying. It feels like a song that they were doing at all of their live shows, which of course we learn in the movie that that was their song that they did at all their live shows. And then when Freddie joined, they started doing it together, and it was so popular as the show that they were going around and doing shows with that it ended up on the album. But it very much feels like one of their early demos that they were just like, this is considered one of our hits, so it has to be on the album. Um, but it is one of those songs that is like right dead set in the middle of you know the transition between Smile and Queen, and this is just like too much on the other side in my opinion. It feels so much like a Smile record and not like a Queen record. Um, and I felt that way all the way until I saw the movie. The movie very much changed my opinion of Doing All Right. I now really like Doing All Right because it's such a well written song. But I think the thing that sells it for me is in the movie and even on the soundtrack. That's the first time I hear "Doing All Right" with Tim's vocals on it, and Tim is the original lead singer. Um, it's a different song with Tim on it. It's a very different song, and you get an immediate idea of what Freddie Mercury adds to this band when you hear the difference in Tim's version and his version. Um, of course, like this is Freddie Mercury. He's one of the greatest vocalists ever. He sings this guy under the table. But at the same time, when you just listen to how layered his vocals are on this song and how much texture he adds to the song, it's a much better song with him on it in every way.
Yeah, it is. And like Tim Stafford's not a bad singer, but dude,
No,
it's like bringing someone off the bench versus bringing in an all-star, isn't it? It's kind of it's a different ball game.
yeah, it's just such a different song with him on it, and I feel like it's so low key, but it's also so beautifully sung by Freddie, and you get that idea in the movie, And again, that's why I grew to appreciate Doing All Right um, recently. I think it is now one of the better songs on the album. It's just getting that idea of Queen's history and what he brought to the band that changed my mind on it.
Yeah, that's fair. And I'm not in love with it, but I appreciate it for what it is. I just still feel like it's sort of on like it's on the chalkboard and the chalkboard's being changed as the formula gets better and then you figure out the equation in the end. It's kind of how it feels to me. Brian May is given this lead songwriting credit along with staff on this song. So they're the two songwriters on this. Again, don't dislike the song, but as we've said kind of from the jump here, it's kind of the evolution of the band. Speaking of evolution of the band, we go from these two songs to a song entitled Great King Rat. Now, this is one of those tracks that's like, number one, you can't forget it because of the name of it, for goodness sake. Great King Rat, written by Freddie Mercury. Who would have thunk it, kids? 5 minutes and 42 seconds for this song. It's the second longest track on the album. This is the first taste of Freddie's songwriting, right, flat out, that we get. What do you think about Great King Rat being Freddie's introduction to the world as a songwriter, not just a vocalist?
Great King Rat is kind of your first hint in this album of what Freddie brings to the band, and it's kind of your first flash of who they'll be later as a group because it has all of the hallmarks of some of their bigger records. Like it had all like the tempo changes and like the big heavy guitar solos on it that you expect from stuff like Bohemian Rhapsody or March of the Black Queen. Um, it has all of those hallmarks. Like this is like the first taste of what all of those songs would become later, and you also get a taste of like their influence from like progressive rock and how much Freddie brought like folklore and all these things into his writing, and that's just how different the second album is from this album. Like you could tell like this song gets a precursor for the second album in a lot of ways.
Yeah, dude, I think you said it best. This is if the first two songs were sort of, an introduction to Queen of what they could be in the future, what they may become, what they may evolve to. Track number three is flat out Freddie going, "Yeah, this is my band. This I run the show now." You know what I mean?
Yeah,
This is my stage. I'm gonna take it.
yeah. I mean, if you look at it this way, that the first two songs are like them coming in and going like, "Oh, we used to be this band," and then it's like, "All right, well, cool. Here's what I got, guys. Like, let me know if you like this." Just by the way, here's what I would do as a songwriter, and it's great. And I don't want to just say that this is a coming out party for Freddie in a lot of ways. I feel like the guitar playing on Great King Rat is some of Brian's best on the album.
Dude, I yeah, like, dude, I love the way you frame this song, and it's a very much 100% true, actually, that there's a taste of not only what they're going to become, but what they're already transforming into. And this song represents a little bit of everything. I mean, so really, I think what we're talking about here is the evolution of this band. Really, from the start of the record to the very end of the record, you kind of see uh, the growth of the band in one set of songs. And dude, there's been plenty of people through the years in rock and roll that have great stage presence. I mean, Alice Cooper was in the '70s, for crying out loud. It's not like it was unheard of to have a bombastic front man, to have a not a and Queen didn't have a wild stage show, but their front man was, uh, uh, he was out there in terms, and dude, he was very outgoing. He was very, um, uh, wore the costumes and just like to have fun with the
Yeah.
audience. He could really hold them in the palm of his hand. It's not like it was unheard of, but how many guys had really had that driving rock beat behind them, where the rest of the band not were taking it seriously, but were doing their jobs and killing it, while the front man, yeah, he was taking it serious, but you could tell Freddie was having so much fun out there, right? This is a very different kind of band for its time, isn't it?
Yes. Um, yeah, it's just so many things when you listen to Great King Rat, and you have like a knowledge of their entire discography, and when you think of this song and how it could fit right next to something like Ogre Battle Fight and like all of the stuff from the second album, and like stuff like the White Queen procession, all the stuff that on their second album creatively they did. Like this is just such a, like I said, it's such a precursor for that.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I don't know. I just keep thinking about what would have happened to Smile had Freddie Mercury never came along. Sometimes we dive into those what ifs on this show, which don't typically take us anywhere, but it's interesting for me in my head to go through it. And here's something that'll blow your mind, Phil. How many great rock and roll bands have we missed out on because certain personnel changes never happened to begin with? Like we just assume that everything we've gotten so far is the best it's ever been. What if there was a band kicking around in 74 that could have been the biggest thing on the planet, but they were one drummer away, or they were one bass player away, or one lead singer away from actually getting the record deal and actually going where they wanted, and they just faded into the background and you never saw them or heard from them again. Maybe they don't even know they exist. That kind of stuff. I don't know. It's crazy if you think about it, because there's a lot of talented musicians out there, man, that never get signed. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah. That's kind of like when you hear those stories of guys that never made it to the NBA, and they were just kind of like a neighborhood legend, and the neighborhood knows how good he was. His school that he went to knows how good he was, but he never made it to the pros.
Yeah. It's Rucker Park, man. That's kind of how,
Yeah.
I mean, it really is. Um, well, the next track, kids, and no snickering from you people in the back. All right. Play nice. Because I would suspect that Freddie Mercury had a fun time with a song called My Fairy King. And I'm not going to speak for the man. Who am I to do that? But I would suspect that perhaps not only did he have fun with it, but he knew exactly how it could be construed and he didn't care, because Freddie was an artist and he wanted to write what he wanted to write and he didn't really care what anybody else thought about it. This song comes in at 4 minutes and 6 seconds. Give me your thoughts, Phil, before I hit you with what I got here. What do you think about My Fairy King?
My Fairy King is essentially the origin story of Freddie Mercury. It's where he gets his name from. The line in there, Mother Mercury, look what you've done for me. That's where the last name Mercury comes from.
Mm,
Um, I feel like there are also things like the title being My Fairy King, and as I told you before, he was a Virgo, and his symbol in their logo was a fairy. Of course, people are gonna go, "Oh, he's gay, so he's fairy." No, no, it was not just a uh, reference to his zodiac sign, but it was a reference to like the folklore and fantasy stuff that he did for a good amount of their first and second album. Um, there's so many great moments on this song, because I feel like it's like the second. Uh, well, not even feel like it is the second song he wrote in the album. This is the first time we see him play piano on the album, and of course, his piano playing for the rest of their discography, for the rest of their time together as a performing band. It's legendary. Because I could be wrong, but I believe on Doing All Right, because that was a Smile record, Brian May played the piano in that. Freddie
mm,
did not play the piano in that. I think he played it later for live performances. But the piano for that was Brian May's thing. The piano for My Fairy King is very much a Freddie Mercury composition. Um, and again, there's so many things I love about Queen as a band, but it would be easy to go into the song and go, oh, with Freddie flexing his muscles as a songwriter and becoming the character, the persona, the performer that we know and love. But the instrumentation on this song is incredible.
mm.
Um, just from start to finish, it's just so good. Um, and the vocals, I mean, him doing just like this streak at the beginning that is like glam rock influenced, and then he cuts it after he cuts into his wailing, he cuts into like this the first verse of the song, which very much sounds like the opening of a fantasy movie of somebody telling you the once upon a time there was a fairy that lives on a hill, and it's so beautifully sung. It's so striking. It's so different from anything else on the album. It's
God, it
just
really
such good.
is.
It's just such a good song, and it's just like that. The vocal. I don't know the terminology for it. Uh, the the vocal technique that he does, it almost sounds like a tremolo, where he's doing that vocal note and it's riffing in and out and like modulating, and he repeats it several times through the song. So good.
Hmm.
Uh, just such a good song.
I mean, we're going back to the Zeppelin reference again. Zeppelin leaned into the damsel and the mist and the minstrels and the horses and a lot of their stuff sounds like old English, sounds like you could picture it nights and dirty England and nasty and countrysides and the rolling hills but I think Queen took that a step further. Like, oh, let's just go with the fairy tale. Let's just don't lean into it. Just lean all the way into it. You know what I mean? It's kind of
Yeah,
where I've always imagined this song. When I hear this song, I think of the Renaissance Festival for some reason. I can't help it.
let's make this like extremely experimental progressive rock with like folk and all these other influences in it, and like have a man that is classically trained to play piano on it,
Mm.
and a fantastic guitar player in the midst of this. It's just so good.
Yeah, it really is. It's an excellent song, and again, it shows where we're going with this band. This is not a one-dimensional band. Nobody can look at Queen and say they're one thing. Like, if you doubt me, kids, go listen to the game and tell me you know who Queen is as a band
Hey,
compared
yeah,
to other albums because it's a totally different album, but they still kill it.
absolutely. You don't have the same vocals. You don't have the same high octave uh, vocals that you get on this song and some of the other songs on this album. And the thing that is so great about Freddie's vocals is they're so versatile. Um, it doesn't feel like he's straining when he's doing those high octave vocals on this song here. It doesn't seem like he's like screaming at us.
Yeah. Yeah, no, he's not screaming. He's singing. There's a big difference. And like one of the things that's been said about him over the years was that Freddie had, if I use the words buck teeth, that sounds disrespectful. I don't mean it. Like he had overbite. Okay.
Yeah,
And it actually affected his bravado. It actually affected his tone without that, without the overbite. He doesn't, it's not the same singer, which is mind blowing to me.
yeah, yeah. One of the things I heard about Freddie Mercury from things I saw is that he didn't like to play piano after a while.
Mm,
And it wasn't because he didn't think he was good. I think it was that um, he kind of became self-conscious about his piano playing, and he was just so much more comfortable strutting across the stage and being up front and performing,
mm.
that it almost felt like it hindered him to have to sit still or stand still and play piano.
I could actually really see that. Yeah, I could see that. Um,
But what would this band be without his piano playing?
yeah, good point. Good point. I
Like
don't have any
seriously,
idea.
like what would Bohemian Rhapsody be without the piano?
No, yeah, no. And even if someone else did it, it still wouldn't have the same soul to it, Man, crazy. Um, yeah, it's a great song. Like I said, kids, it's I would say it's one of a kind, but you could say songs since then. At the time, maybe you could say it's one of a kind, but it no one could do it like Freddie could.
No.
100%.
Tom Clark 6M Podcast is sponsored in part by Radius Law Group. Every day, Radius helps individuals, families, small businesses, and nonprofit organizations throughout North Carolina, Florida, and Pennsylvania resolve their legal issues by providing effective legal counsel in the areas of estate planning, as well as elder law and Medicaid. Radius Law holds the radical belief that working with a lawyer can indeed be enjoyable. So give them a call at 1-800-519-5667 for more information and tell them that Tom Clark 6M Podcast sent you.
Well, kids, that does it for side one. And that's that we're not even done yet. We still got 6 songs left, and man, we're gonna go ahead and jump to it. Track number 1, if you're flipping the vinyl, track number 1 on side 2 is Liar. Again, written by Mercury here. This runs for 6 minutes and 25 seconds. So I got thoughts on this song, and I'd love to hear what you think. So I'm gonna let you start this off. Tell me what you think about Liar.
I love Liar. It is one of the best songs in the album, in my opinion. Um, I think it doesn't quite hit the same until you see them perform it live. Like if you're new to Queen and you've never heard this album, I would challenge you to go and watch the video for it because the video changes everything thematically about the song. Um, I also throw this at you. I feel like the first four songs of this album give you an idea of who this band is because when you think about the Beatles, it was pretty much the Paul and John show. They did all the songwriting, they did a lot of the creative side of it, and we saw tastes of what uh, Ringo could do or what George could do, but it was mainly their show. The first half of this album is the Brian and Freddie show. The second half of the album, you get more of an idea of who they are as a quartet because you see a lot more of John and Roger's um, strong points on the second half. And I'm not gonna say that's straight away here, but even at the beginning of Liar, Liar has this very good instrumentation into the beginning of the song. And again, that's why I say you have to watch them perform it to get the full experience of the song. Because when it first starts and you get in the cowbell and it starts and it has like this great guitar and bass and all this stuff. And the first thing you see is Freddie is like strutting around with his back turned to the camera and the audience. And he's like stretching and doing all this dancing with his trademark microphone with the mic stand broken in half, and he's stretching and doing all this cool stuff. And by the time it gets to the end of the instrumentation and it's time for him to hit the first few words of the first verse, he flips and he turns his face to the camera and he starts singing the first few words. I have sinned, dear Father. Father, I have sinned. He has that really cool leather glove on with like the diamond claws on it. And it just tells you everything about who he is as a performer. He's got the long hair going at the time. It is just so awesome. And his performance for this is what makes this band what they are. And this song is just brilliant to watch them perform every time. I've seen several performances of it. It is amazing.
I mean, I'll do you one better. And I think maybe this song should have kicked off the album, in my opinion. Like, I like the idea of like we've been talking about the growth. You see the natural growth and what the band becomes toward the end of this album, who they're going to be. I kind of think it would have been an amazing shot out of a cannon if they'd begun with this song.
I agree. And I think the reasons why you're saying that is because it's such a great start of the second half of the
Yeah.
album. If you don't see it as two parts, if you only listen to it as a CD, you don't get the idea that the album is split in half. You don't get that. But to start the second half of this album with that song is such a great intro. It's just such a great song. Um, his vocals on it, like I said, it's hard for me to not think about him performing on it because my introduction to the song is watching him perform it.
Mm.
And just like his vocals on it are just so good. The breakdown in the bridge, like I mentioned earlier, of when they're doing the all day long part, and you can hear John's vocals as background vocals, which I don't think they get enough credit for just how great they are as a four-part harmony.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Th- They are tremendous. There again, there's no weak member in this band. They
Mm-mm.
all add something so great vocally. And John didn't sing a lot of lead vocal, but his background vocals were fantastic, and you get a taste of that in this song.
Yeah, and you said it. You said it right. I mean, you can really hear later when they do the big thematic, like sounds like Broadway production number songs that you can. They're all singing together, but man, they absolutely don't get enough credit. It's like Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. You take one of those guys out, it's not the same band. It's still a good harmony, but it works because they're all together. Like George, Paul, and John together sound amazing together. Like King's X sound amazing. They're a three piece. They sound amazing together. Like some guys can harmonize perfectly. You're right, dude. Queen does not get enough credit here at all.
Yeah, and I mean you can hear that a little bit on Doing All Right when they're doing like the swell of notes at certain parts in the song, and they're all singing it in harmony. Sounds just beautiful. Um, yeah, I can't gush enough about Liar. I think it's one of the best songs on the album.
I agree. It was actually a Queen's second single, and also, as we said, written by Freddie. And the Electra version, I guess the radio version, took the 6 minute 27-second track and cut it to 3 minutes because that's what record companies do, kids. They ruin everything. So yeah, again, this is one of the first glimpses of Queen's musical experimentation, which I think we can all agree on that. It's often a 10-minute closing number for them on stage, showcasing extended solo by bassist John Deacon, and I'm down for that
Yeah,
any day, actually.
yeah. I just think this is one of the staples of their live sets. Um, and there's a reason why it stayed in rotation in their live sets because it's one of those that they perform it so well. Um, it's you can't miss with this one.
And Brian May ending the song the way he does with that guitar, that sizzling guitar, and it just dies down. Oh, it's perfect. Perfect. Um, well, kids, we've not even yet begun here because we are now moving on to track number 2, which, if you keep taking notes, it's actually track 6. All right. This one is The Night Comes Down, written by Brian May, 4 minutes and 24 seconds. This song, again, Phil, it's one of those things where, like, yes, it's Queen. You can hear that it's Queen, but it's a little bit different. Like, it's not exactly, I mean, it's not, it's not Freddie here, right? I mean, this is, um, yeah, again, it's just it's a different track. This song follows what would become trademark May themes, such as coming of age nostalgia over the loss of childhood to the past and the difficulties of life as an adult. Brian May, let's be honest, was a lot deeper than maybe he gets credit for as a songwriter.
Yeah,
Um,
he's a great songwriter.
he is.
He,
And this is also, and I never knew this, what could be considered an ambiguous reference to Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. May is admittedly a Beatles fan, commenting in numerous interviews on their impact on him. Um, Interesting. So yeah, this is Freddie on lead vocal, but what do you think about this, man? Because again, this is another one of those songs that just makes you stop what you're doing and go, "Is this a rock and roll band? What's going on here?" But man, it's so good.
um, I feel like Liar transitions into this song so well because,
Mm.
like you said, it has that great sizzle off at the end of Liar, and then it starts. The Night Comes Down starts with that great guitar solo, great guitar part. That's like kind of a swell, and then I feel like John Deacon is the kind of the unsung star of the song. His
Mm.
bass on this song is so good at the beginning of it, and just how it's not like it would have been very easy for them to start like they started with Liar with like this great guitar and rhythm, but the rhythm driving the beginning of the song is very low and mellow, and uh it's all John doing this great uh bass riff. It's just so good, and I feel like that is like I said, the second half you get a real showcase of everybody's strengths. This is a showcase of John's strengths as a bass player, and what we get later and stuff like Another One Bites the Dust and some of his songs that he was like frontman in some ways. It's I don't know. Every time I listen to this song, I'm just like, man, John was just so good.
He really was. And the vocals, we mentioned earlier, the possible connection between Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. When I was young, it came to me and I could see the sun breaking. Lucy was high and so was I, dazzling, holding the world inside. I mean, the best musicians out there pay tribute to each other in songs all the time. They don't just, go for diss tracks, but sometimes they'll pay tribute. So that's a nice touch. Yeah, again,
Yeah,
this song takes you on a different ride than the others have. It's even different. I mean, honestly, I think it's different than, I don't know if I say it's different than every song here, but it's very different than, I mean, it's different than Liar, it's different than My Fairy King. There's elements of both here, but
yeah,
it goes off on its own. And the instrumentation here, dude, the production of the song is
it's
off the
amazing.
charts. So good.
It's amazing. I mean, I it's hard to not gush about Freddie's vocals on most of these songs, but his vocals are very good on this song because they're so subdued in some ways, but he's still doing. You can catch the glam rock influences in here because it still like has that kind of high pitch, high octave to it, but it's still mellow enough that it fits the vibe of the song. And I have to imagine that was difficult to do. You can't just come in and do like this like streaky um high parts of the song and then mesh with like these very low register bass parts.
Yeah, good point. Good point. This song runs for 4 minutes and 24 seconds. As we said, this is a showcase of everybody on the band. I mean, I personally don't know if Roger Taylor gets enough credit for this tune because
He doesn't.
his drumming is so good, dude. He was so good at what he did.
Yeah. I mean, just the way in the beginning that he starts. And I think one of the things that they also don't get credit for because they're also good at what they do. Um, they'll allow each member to have that one song where they are the star of the record. And I don't feel like anybody stepped on John's toes early in the song. They let him lead the song with the bass. And I feel like that's why Another One Bites the Dust was a hit because they let him lead that song with the bass. Brian never comes in and has this crazy guitar solo. It's probably the most subdued he is on guitar on Another One Bites the Dust because he let John have his moment. And I
Mm.
feel like that is the thing that they were tremendous about for the entire discography.
Yeah, they were cooperative. It wasn't one guy running the show, or two guys running the show. I mean, I've always assumed that if you ask a working musician what gets in the way of the band more than anything else, that guy would probably say the band. Like,
Yeah.
because talented bands will find their way up. Even if the record label's not on board, they'll get picked up by another record label. Talented bands are probably not going to be stopped because they're so talented. And usually that much talent, there's at least one guy that's the driving force of it that will not be denied. That band will eventually make it in some form or fashion. But it's when the band can't get along and it's all my
Yeah.
ball. It's my ball. It's my game. Well, no, it's not. It's all of us. It's all of us working together. And when they realize that, now to be fair, Phil, we've seen bands who've had to replace members in the past because it just wasn't working out, wasn't clicking. But once you get that formula, man, it's gold and they can't be stopped.
Yeah. I mean, this is their first album too. For them to work so well together on
Mm.
several parts of this album just shows a lot of how well they trusted each other by the time this album dropped. Because it would have been very easy on their first album, and like I said, if you use the demo analogy, everybody wants to get their spots in, right?
Mm.
Everybody wants to show, look, I am a great guitar player, I'm a great drummer. But they very much on this song were like, no, this is John's moment.
Yeah. Um. Well, speaking of moments, the next moment is not John's moment. Track number 7, which is also track 3 of side 2, is Modern Times Rock and Roll. This is a quick one. If you blink, you'll miss it. It's a minute and 49 seconds is the complete runtime of this track. This is Roger Waters um, on lead vocal here. So let me get your take on this because excuse me, Roger Taylor, wrong band, Phil.
Not Pink Floyd.
Wrong band, close, but not quite the same band. But Roger Taylor on lead vocal. Um, I'll go out the gate and take a chance here. I don't hate this song, but if I tell you I don't ever skip it, I'd be lying. But
Yeah.
that's only because I love the rest of the album so much. This song kind of feels like it doesn't fit. Like I question why it's here other than let's just give Roger something fun to do. I don't know if that's the case, but like what do you think about this?
It's so weird because this is a Roger Taylor record through and through. It is a absolute Roger Taylor record. The second
Mhm.
it starts, you could tell this is a Roger record. Even if you're not looking at the liner notes or anything, like I mean, the tone of it, everything, you could tell it's a Roger record. And it's so funny when you compare them to the Beatles again that uh, you knew a Ringo record when you got a Ringo record. And not to pick on Ringo, but sometimes Ringo records were the low point of the album. um, I feel like Roger has moments where his song at the low point, but Roger Taylor is extremely talented, man. This is a guy that can play, I believe, 3 instruments. I could be wrong. And he actually a pretty good singer. His vocals on this song are very good. It's not my favorite Roger Taylor record. I feel like Tenement Funster is good. I feel like he has other songs that I enjoy more. Um, but like I said, the second half is giving you a highlight of what these other guys do. It's not just the Brian and Freddie show anymore. And so I feel like this is a good uh, kind of interlude of what Roger brings to the band, not just as a drummer. He wrote the song as well, I think. It's a good song. It's not a bad song. I do agree that it doesn't kind of fit the tone of the rest of the album. Um, but if you're looking at this album as an introduction to these four guys, it's perfect.
He did write this song actually, and I'll tell you this: when this song slows down, it's great.
Yes,
But like the first part, I'm like, it's spastic. It's all over the place, man.
It is, but I also feel like it fits just their style of music because their music is so almost schizophrenic. It starts one way and then it'll completely change tempo or it'll completely change tone, and all of that is here in this song. But it's kind of like Roger Taylor's version of it. Like the guitar playing and everything in this is still tremendous. And again, his vocals are still tremendous. The background vocals are great. Um, so I can't say this is a bad song. I don't even know if I would say it's a low point in the album. It's just so different than everything else.
And when I say this song slows down, that may have been misconstrued or maybe missaid. I don't know if it slows down, but I think once you get past the initial intro and then kind of get in the groove of the song, it's a pretty good song. But like it's not my favorite. You know what this song reminds me of? The song actually reminds me of Iggy Pop and the Stooges. I don't know why.
Kind of does. It has like that
It really
twang to
does,
it.
right? Sort of that all over the place tempo.
You look at it this way, I feel like in some ways The Night Comes Down kind of feels like a blues record. This song kind of feels like them doing like this weird, like almost like twangy, like traditional rock record. Um, and I mean, I don't know how well that fits, like I said, but it's not a bad record. If it's a Roger Taylor saying, "Hey guys, this is me. This is what I got." If everybody brought their songs to the table, and he comes and plays this, I don't know if I would say no, that's not making an album because it's a bad song. And I think that's probably how they looked at it.
Yeah, I agree with that. Well, it's all right. So the next song it's a very different change of pace from me because I love this next song. This next song is "Son and Daughter," written by Brian May. Freddie's back on lead, 3 minutes and 22 seconds. And dude, the hook of this song,
It's perfect.
there's 1,000 rock songs that, if I say similar, I don't mean similar, but similar in terms of there's that sort of a dark, like an ominous hook, but it's very bluesy, very British British rock blues is what I'm thinking of here, like a sort of a hybrid. But man, I really love this song, dude. When it gets in the pocket, and just one of those songs that some songs you can bob your head to. This is one of those you just sort of like real easy headbang to, but not like too aggressive. Oh, it's so good, man. I love this tune.
It's so great. The vocals are great, and I mean, I would submit this is the best chorus on the album. Um, I think it's just such a memorable chorus. I think that the way they sing it in unison is so great. Um, like I said, those glam rock influences that are across this album never feel like they're out of place. They never feel like they're overpowering. It would have been so easy for them all streaking I at the beginning of it to sound hokey, but it doesn't. It sounds so cool. Um, it's so good. I mean, in the verses of it and Freddie doing his vocals, on the verses are it's just so good. The instrumentation is great. Um, Kind of the bridge part where it does like that, it's so different from the rest of the song where it's just kind of like this, I don't even know how to describe it. It almost sounds like it's like in a whirlwind.
Mm.
Um, but it's so beautifully played. It's a great song. This is one of those songs where you would think creatively this is a Freddie Mercury song because
Mm-hmm.
when you listen to the lyrics of it and the theme of it, it's like, oh, okay, this is him struggling with his sexuality. It's not. It's a Brian May song. It's
Mm-hmm.
just like when you find out that the idea to dress and drag for the "I Want to Break Free" record was not Freddie Mercury's idea. It's actually Brian May's idea.
Mm. I love stuff like that. I love when stories hit you unexpectedly and you always assume it's one way or the other and it turns out to be something completely different. I love that
Yeah.
actually. Um,
Um,
yeah.
but yeah, the guitar solo on this is great. Um, it's a great record all around.
Son and Daughter, written by Brian, as we said, was the B side for the single Keep Yourself Alive. Song was played, this is some good bit of trivia. The song was played in the very first concert under the name of Queen in 1970. So if you go to this concert, and maybe you knew these guys when they were called Smile, and they come out with this guy in the front and with this riff, and you're like, okay, it's not the same band anymore. What happened? Like, holy Lord. It was a regular feature in Queen's live set until 76. The song originally housed his famous guitar solo. The album version of the song does not feature the guitar solo. The solo would not be
Yeah.
properly recorded until 74 for Brighton Rock from Sheer Heart Attack. Until this time, and occasionally afterward, the guitar solo would take over the middle of Son and Daughter during concerts, allowing the rest of the band a bit of rest and costume change. So
Don't
there you go.
don't get me gushing over how much I love Brighton Rock. Again, Sheer Heart Attack is my favorite Queen album. It's so great. But yeah, there's so many good things about this. I just think the way that it starts immediately with the chorus and lets you know that the chorus is really the centerpiece of this entire song. It's really the thing that keeps you engaged the entire song. Because early in the song we get all of these we get all this instrumentation before they sing a single note. And this starts right out the gate with the chorus.
I mean, this is Zeppelin-esque to me. I mean, it
It
really
is.
sounds. You know what I mean?
It is. It is. And that's why I'm like the you can see the influences here. You can see how at some point people are like, "Oh, these guys are going to be something. They're going to be a monster," and then they completely change from album to album. No,
Mm-hmm.
none of the other albums sounds like this album.
Mm-hmm. Well, here again, we're gonna not skip. We're gonna jump to the next one. This is again, Phil. This band's taking us on a somewhat different tone here. The song "Jesus." The chorus in the hands of any other band, and I don't know, would be not laughed at, but just not taken seriously. But dude, Freddie has such a presence.
Yes.
Vocally, not just on stage, but vocally, obviously, and even on the record. I mean, how many guys with a voice that powerful you can say actually comes through on the record where you feel it versus you had to be in the concert to hear it. No, you can feel it. Like,
Yeah.
what a different song this is. The lyrics, in part, of course, tell the story of Jesus of Nazareth. Mercury is credited with writing the song. Let's see. The track features 2-chord rhythm section during the verses with a long instrumental break toward the end of the song. Because of the effects by May's Red Special guitar, which you mentioned earlier, among other things, many early followers of Queen viewed the band as something of a psychedelic rock band. I could actually see where people would get that idea. This song runs for 3 minutes 45 seconds. Yes, again, as we said, written by Mercury. Dude, again, this is a very different song from what we've heard so far. How do you think this song fits in with the rest of the tracks here?
It's interesting because we saw them do religious themes a few more times across their first 3 albums. Um, it's interesting, and it's interesting given what we know, well, what we learned about Freddie Mercury later, and like his struggles with you know, coming from a religious family that wasn't Catholic from what I remember. I don't think his family was Catholic. Um, but coming from a religious family and also being homosexual and like the conflict that was there, it's just such an interesting choice for him to decide to sing the song about Jesus of Nazareth. Um, and um, it would have been very easy for this to come off hokey or preachy, but it doesn't. It just sounds like a really good vocalist telling a great story. And I think that is kind of his trademark for at least the first two albums. That he was just so good and so compelling as a vocalist that you could sit and listen to this guy sing a story about anything.
I mean, if you read the lyrics, it sounds like a Bob Dylan song. If you just
He
read the
kind of does.
lyrics, you know, like you said, it's just a storyteller, man. It's good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that it's not the most flashy song on the album. They did so many different things, experimenting with sounds and doing different things that this song seems like I don't want to say it just seems like, all right, well, let's just do something simple. Let's do something kind of bare bones. And this is kind of a nice way to ease you into the outro of the song. I mean, outro of the album. Um, and I do get like the psychedelic rock vibes here. You can see all the influences here. It has kind of like a folk sound to it too.
Yeah, it really does. God, it really does. Actually, there's a lot of stuff going on here, man. No doubt about it. Uh, yeah, I like this song. Again, if you just look at it as a storytelling song and don't try to take too much out of it, I mean, you can if you want, right? I don't know if he's preaching to anybody. I don't know where his head is in terms of what he believes. Not for me to say, but like, it's one of those songs that could be taken any number of ways. And honestly, who's to say on the day he wrote this he wasn't feeling a certain kind of way? Doesn't mean you got to feel like something forever. Like to label
Yeah.
somebody as a traditional or non-traditional is not really fair. Songwriters, their moods ebb and flow like everybody else's does, and their creative juices change based on what's going on in their lives. So, yeah, who knows
Well,
where this came from? But man, it's awesome.
yeah, I mean, I would submit this that while I will say that uh, My Fairy King is the origin story for Freddie Mercury, this is before he delved completely into who he was as a performer and just his voice as a writer. We saw hints of it, but we don't get him. We don't get any of the stuff that he's known for, like the love songs he wrote later. We don't get any of the conflict like we got in Lily of the Valley and stuff. None of that is here. This is kind of like just a straightforward record.
Yeah, for real. So kids, we're about to wrap this thing up, and the last track here, shortest song on the record, 1 minute 15 seconds. This is Seven Seas of Rye. This is an instrumental, uh, written by Freddie. Dude, you mentioned his piano earlier. Holy Lord,
Amazing.
isn't this something? I,
It's so good. It's funny because when I first discovered this album, I used to skip this because it just felt like an outro. Um, but when you discover this discography and you know that this is essentially a demo for the full song, later in their discography, I think it's on the second album. Isn't it? No, it's on Sheer Heart Attack.
mhm.
Um, but it's just like it's kind of like when you uh you watch a video, and then rap is good for this. They'll do like a beat change and they'll go to this. They'll hint at this song that's later on the album, and you listen to this song at the end of the album, and it kind of ends, and it's like, okay, no, I want that song though. This sounds amazing. No, give us the
Right.
rest of the song.
Yeah, and also, man, you could also make the argument that this is a very early audition for soundtrack work they would do later in their career as well.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Wow.
Second, the actual song is on the second album. It's not on Share Touch.
Uh,
Um, there's like there's like another version of it on Sheer Heart Attack. That's what I'm thinking of. But yeah, this is definitely at the end of the album, and that's why I say it's hard to listen to this album and it doesn't sound like a demo, because it's like you get to the end of this album, you get the bare bones of what this will be, and it's like, oh man, that sounds amazing. And I couldn't imagine being around at that time and hearing this album when it came out and going, all right, well, where's the rest of it? We have the we have the luxury of having, streaming platforms and just being able to just go, oh, here it is.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's so at this point you're either on board with this band, what the potential is, or you hear this instrumental and you're left going, wait, what? Like you said, it's I don't know what the answer is. Like, how would had I been, and listen, I was on this planet in '73, but as a baby, Phil, as a as an infant, okay, let's stress that. But had I been a teenager in '73, I don't know how this album would have hit my ears. Maybe I would have been like, what am I listening to? This is different, that kind of thing. I mean, like from the opening track of Keep Yourself Alive, and we have the needle drop at the beginning, which we just failed to mention, which sets the tone for, hey, this is going to be an experience, just buckle up. And like, it's not a concept album, but it is sort of, in my opinion, an introduction to what this album is what they're on their way to becoming. But then they end
Yeah.
up with the instrumental and everything in between. Like, it's what a debut, man. What an amazing debut for these guys. And again, dude, at the time, how many people really knew what they had versus the first time you heard Hendrix play and you go, oh my God. But like, I wonder if people at the time knew what they had, or if it was just like, okay, these guys have something, but let's just see what they do next, right?
Yeah. Um, I don't know if even if I heard this album when it came out, anything would prepare me for the second album, because the second album is so vastly different.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, we get hints of what the second album will be in songs like the great Great King Rat and um My Fairy King and stuff like that, but not quite on the level that we got. I mean, I don't think I heard any song in this album that would prepare me for March of the Black Queen.
Yeah. That's fair. That's fair. Um, so just to give the final track its props, yes, it was written by Freddie, but mainly written by Freddie, with Brian contributing the second middle eight. The song is officially credited to Mercury only, however. A rudimentary instrumental version appears as the final track on the group's debut album, Yes, with the final version on the follow-up, Queen 2. The song features distinctive piano introduction. These piano runs are sampled in It's a Beautiful Day on the album Made in Heaven. In a '77 radio interview, Mercury described the subject of the song as a figment of his imagination. In the Queen musical We Will Rock You, the Seven Seas of Rhye is a place where the Bohemians are taken after they are brain drained by Khashoggi. And now I'm thinking, what in the world are we talking about here?
Yeah, I'm sure there's lore that only they know about that. Yeah.
Dude, at the end of the day, you could make the argument that this band is a bridge between it's a bridge of glam rock, you know, British blues, metal. If I can use, I don't know if I'd say the word metal, but British blues rock.
Yeah, there's a little bit of metal in there.
Yeah, cinematic, operatic music. And somewhere in the middle of all that is Queen, who defies description. You can call them a rock band. You could also call them other things too. But like,
Yeah. They're an
yeah,
experience.
they're an experience. Well done. Yeah, they really are.
An experience. Um, I That's why I'm like, I feel like the second album is more of them coming into their own. The album cover is what they're known for. It's the shot from the Bohemian Rhapsody video later in their career. It's the thing that everybody does the whole homage to. Um, like, I feel like the sound of that album really gave you an idea of who they were as a band and what they wanted to do, you know, when it came to experimenting. But I feel like this album is just so good on its own. Um, I feel like it is, in my opinion, one of the best classic rock albums ever. I feel like that is a tall thing to say about this album, but it's definitely one of my favorites.
Yeah, I dig it, and you're right. Number two is iconic. The cover is iconic for sure. Yeah, wow.
Yeah, I mean, come on, the procession and just how thematic it is and how epic it is. Such a good album as well. But this album is just, I mean, to me, it is great start to finish.
Yeah, I agree totally. There's a lot more to cover here, kids, because as we know, Queen didn't do just the one record. They did many records. Uh, and what a journey. I mean, maybe one of these days we'll commit to an artist, and we've done some Beatle albums on here. So maybe one day we'll be ambitious and attempt to do all the Beatles albums. That'd be fun. And Queen might have to be on that list as well, because, when you get a legendary band, you want to talk about them. Why not, right? Um, so Phil, before I get your last word, where does this album fall for you? If it's not your favorite Queen album, where is it? Like, is it top three, top four? Where does it fall for you?
I would say it's probably top 4, top 3, or something like that. Because I feel like it's such a great it's such a great debut album. I don't know if you could have possibly crafted a better debut for this band. Uh, and I feel like it does so many things for them as a group. I feel like it's influential in some ways. Of course, like I said, it's not as influential as their second or third album. Um, but I feel like they were on a streak with those first 3 albums where they were all just perfect. They're unmatched to me. And I know that A Night at the Opera is like the probably the most famous Queen album because it has Bohemian Rhapsody on it. Um, but I enjoy the first 3 albums more. Um, I I I would put it up there with The Game as another great album. I would say The Works is a great album as well. Um, yeah, I would say it's in my top 3, top 4.
Mm. Well, kids, there you have it. There is Queen, a very, very brief snapshot of the band, and also a fairly in depth look, at least from this perspective, of their debut album. So, Phil, I don't know what more you can say about this, but we'll try to put a bow on it. What's your last word? Give me your last word on Queen, the album.
Hey, without getting into how I think Mad the Swine should have made the album because it fits the album more than uh, Jesus does. um, yeah, I'm one of those people that enjoys Mad the Swine. But if people can't tell, I really like this band. Um, I think this is a great album. Like I said, I don't think that you could have put together a better debut album for them. Um, it is definitely on my list of favorite classic rock albums. Um, Secret here, guys. Sometimes we do albums for this podcast, and I'll go and try and listen to it days ahead to get the feel of it. No. I listen to this album all the time. So I listen to it, of course, before we record it, but this is me, of course, going through most of the song and knowing most of the words to the album because I listen to it regularly. And that just tells you how I feel about this album. That tells you how I feel about this band.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. There's some stuff I don't really have to necessarily listen to ahead of time. I did with this one because I haven't listened to it in like a little while. Some records I don't have to do that. This one I did, but no, it's definitely going back in my rotation. Hasn't been in it in a while, but it's definitely going to go back in it. As we said, kids, there's a lot more to come from this band. Their biggest moments ever are still on the way. This band is not quite the worldwide phenomenon they would later become, thanks to a certain soundtrack, thanks to a certain operatic song, which you could argue put them on the Mount Rushmore of rock and roll bands, great rock and roll bands of all time. And also,
You mean Bicycle?
Bicycle, of course. Of course. What else can I be talking about? But we're just teasing folks. And then, of course, the song with the amazing driving bass line that even your great grandmother knows how that song goes. I would,
Yeah, I mean,
I would submit kids know it and old people know it, and everywhere in between, at least they've heard it at least once.
yeah, I mean, yeah. If you don't know this record, you might know another record with a certain famous guy by the name of David Bowie.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, we all know the famous story, of course. Freddie Mercury and Queen and David Bowie completely ripped off Vanilla Ice, stole the guy's stuff. Those thieves. By the way, the bass line to Under Pressure is so incredibly fun to play, and it's like not extraordinarily hard. Oh, when it gets to the second half of the song, holy Lord, makes me want to play
John
it. It's
Deacon.
so much fun.
Give John Deacon his flowers.
Yes, 100%. Well, kids, there you have it. There's Queen number 1. We also call Queen. You get it. Yes, stay tuned for more Queen, I'm sure. Stay tuned for more album reviews and a lot of other stuff. I never do this. I never hardly ever thank anybody on the way out the door, but thanks everybody for downloading the 6M podcast and for showing us some love. We very much appreciate it. And stay tuned, folks. There's a lot more to come, as always. But in the meantime, that is Queen.
Hey, thanks for listening to the show. Check out our social media on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at 6M Podcast. We'll see you next time.